Listen to the rumble. Listen to the roar. Slowly in 3. They'll be flying off 4. Watch them now.
Welcome, race fans. This is Joshua Shaw with the Vintage Racing Podcast, and we are here tonight with a good friend of mine, a gentleman named Randy, but everyone else calls him Detroit. And Randy, I mentioned that this podcast is going to be a lot of different types of racing, not just sprint cars and Indy cars, kind of like what I'm always around. Randy is a vintage motorcycle racer, and in a very, very extraordinary way. He's going to tell us about his bikes. But before we get there, I want to explain to you that Randy is the superintendent for the Detroit schools. And if you can picture Morgan Freeman and Lean On Me yelling on the roof, kills your brain cells. That's Randy. that's where I picture you. And just a great guy. Randy, tell us about you. Take me back. First off, before we get to the motorcycles, tell me where you grew up.
I grew up in Detroit proper. So I won't say Detroit and have grown up 3 hours away. I actually grew up in Detroit. Started in an area called Downriver. Delray, pretty rough. Grew up with, it was 8 of us, 7 siblings. Then we moved to the west side of Detroit, and it was like this shocker, like, man, this is something right out of the Jeffersons moving on up. It wasn't a high rise, though, but went to school in Detroit. Didn't have much direction. Everybody told me I was a pretty smart kid. And one of the neighborhood dads, I had both my parents, but, it was a time when people took care of other people's children, convinced me to go into the military. And so I joined the Air Force, and during basic training realized I was tricked because it wasn't like Disney World, but it was cool. And that kind of saved my life, got me to seeing the world. And my last tour of duty was in Boston, and there I started thinking about the rough experience that my older brother had and wanted to work with young people so he wouldn't have that same experience. And Detroit, growing up in Detroit kind of give you an edge where it kind of prepares you. This was way before they made Detroit versus everybody sweatshirt, so I kind of felt that way. I've since changed. Is Detroit and everybody. But having grown up in Detroit kind of prepared me for the bigger world.
That's man. I can't, honestly, I can't say that I can understand that because I don't, but I can try. It's a different world, and it's cool to me that here we sit, we're both into the same thing, and we've got so many similarities. From the time we met, we hit it off.
That's right.
Vintage everything. I come from the racing world. The four wheels, sprint cars. You're into the motorcycles, but we instantly, we're into old gas pumps and old signs and antiques. And
that's right.
And then you and guys like you and Justin Walls and Bobby Green, you guys have lit my fire with the vintage motorcycle stuff, and I'm trying to piece one together.
You're doing it.
But tell
For
me,
folks who haven't seen, he has a bad 1914 Indian Twin motor. I'm just waiting for the stock market to crash so he can sell it to me. No, he's not. I will make sure he does not sell it. So don't call Josh. He's going to turn that into a race bike.
That's right. Well, how did you get bit? Did you get bit by the motorcycle bug first, or was it cars?
It was the cars. You're growing up in the Motor City, and it was this whole vibe of having a hot rod, a cool car. I'm this black cat in Detroit, and sometimes stereotypes do bold true. So if you didn't have a Cadillac, you had made it in the city. So my dad always talked about owning a Cadillac, but around 14, 15, I got a chance to really start looking at cars as not just a means of transportation, but being cool. So when I hit 17, My sister sold me her 72 Dodge Coronet 4-door 318. I put a California rake on it. I was putting it in.
What kind of wheels?
Might have been Kragers or some aluminum things. I don't think they matched. This was way before.
Ansons or something.
It was terrible. But what's crazy, we kind of, and I try to tell people this, you kind of shape your future by how you think about yourself, especially when I work with young people. But when I was about 13, we used to go out to Farmington to look at mini bikes and dirt bikes. It's Detroit, concrete jungle, right? Mother wouldn't allow us to get one, but someone threw away this motorcycle with no motor in it at the end of my block. And so we would push each other around, on this on this bike with no motor, daydreaming about the day we would get a motorcycle. Then being in the Air Force gave me a little bit of means to start buying cars. So I had a 70 Mustang, then a 69. Kept moving up, got into a couple Shelbys, had a Boss 302, and eventually did a bunch of shows, had a bunch of cars, but got into what I couldn't have, which was Stingrays, and crates, couldn't afford them at the time, and that jumped to mini bikes and jumped to scooters. And when I got into super vintage scooters, because if there's two things we do in the country. We don't respect our elders and this beautiful architecture that's around us. So I like stuff that's old. It has a history. And that led to vintage motorcycles. And, I tell people all the time, don't drink, don't smoke, but, I got a habit. It's bad and it's costly,
I know I've seen your old bikes, and I'm going to have you tell me about those in a second. But I've also seen you with some 70s style choppers and big long front ends, and
right.
And then I've seen you on big dresser bikes. I mean, kind of all different types.
Right.
So what, take us down that route of what came first. Was it? I know you already mentioned the mini bikes and stuff, but were you building 70s choppers? Was you immediately into the old stuff?
Well, I was a strange kid. We had a farm down in Georgia, Hawkinsville, about an hour and a half south of Atlanta. And I was a kid bringing home farm tools and things like that because it had not only this unbelievable use, but this artistry to it. And then anything that my father touched, I wanted. I was strange, though. I was, the moss that hangs on the southern trees. I was trying to bring that back and grow that up north, I guess I really was a weird kid. And so, but again, anything that had that look, that sound, and that speed. What kid in Detroit didn't want to go fast? And because I wasn't doing the party scene, like I said, kind of grew up in a rough area, and my brother probably did every drug under the sun, and it really saved the rest of us. When I hang out now, I'm high on life. I don't party with alcohol and drugs because I watch what my brother went through. And so that just kept me into other stuff. Didn't have to say I went to this gig. I can say I went to this race.
Yeah.
And if you grew up in Detroit, you knew where Livernois and Warren, because that's where the race car street racing was. It was at the White Castle.
Okay.
And if you were somebody, you raced at White Castle. So by the time I went into the Air Force, the racing scene had moved around Detroit, the Boulevard and Rosa Park. I came back with a 70 Mustang with a hopped up 302. I was racing 5.0 Mustangs. And so what I realized, though, as I moved from the cars to the motorcycles, I could get more motorcycles into space,
Yeah. Tell me about Belle Isle.
Oh, come on now.
Because that's where the Indy cars race.
Yeah,
guys who listen to this are going to know that's where the Indy cars race. But I know before Indy cars, it had a whole different scene.
Yeah, the scene on Belle Isle when I was coming of age was if you were going to be cool with a ride, you had to be at Belle Isle, right? And each generation can talk about Belle Isle in a different way. But for me, you had to have a sweet ride. You go to Belle Isle, and if you was really cool, and I look back at pictures now and I go, man, I was a nerd, but back then I thought I was cool. And if you went on the back strip and hung out there, you made it. You was in the crowd, and so Belle Isle was the spot. And all you did was just rode around the island.
Yeah.
You didn't do anything. Now, but if you weren't tough and you got stuck on the back strip, then you realized that you weren't tough. So Belle Isle was that scene. If you were dating, you didn't make it cool until you took the girl to Belle Isle, and hopefully you didn't get caught. But anyway, so Belle Isle was a spot, and it's historical in the sense that the person who Central Park laid out Belle Isle,
really?
And you can still find great photos. There's a car, I believe it's Caravan or something to that nature, about 1909. There's a picture that's floating around in front of the Belle Isle Casino. And you'll see all these cars with this huge hump on it. Electric cars is the hot scene right now.
Yeah.
But in this photo, there's about 20 electric cars and about another 20 motorcycles. And there's even a guy in a top hat looking like Uncle Sam. And a friend of mine has an original photo. Then I was out visiting Wheels Through Time, talking with Dale the first time around, then Matt the next time. And he had this picture that says unknown location, and there was a building that I recognized from Belle Isle. And I said, "Hey, Dale, that's Belle Isle." He said, "What? You know that?"
That's so excellent.
So
that's cool.
So much history with Belle Isle.
Yeah, and those guys appreciate that.
Yeah.
To look, find a picture, someone identify where the picture's at for Dale and Matt. That's huge.
Matt, if you are listening to this, did you hear what Josh said? I would love a copy. Anyway, I digress.
Well, I know we all know that you can't have cool cars and cool motorcycles without. You got to go to work and you got to get a job and pay for them.
Right.
Tell us about some of your jobs before you were the shot at schools. What was your first job, man?
My first job was King's Arthur, Coney Island. This was my first job where I got a check and paid taxes. Mm-hmm. Before that, I've been working since I was 9. I had a paper route.
Yeah.
When I was one of them kids, I didn't want one block. I had 10 blocks, I've been hustling a long time.
Yeah.
And then I moved up to King Arthur. That was on Plymouth near Greenfield. And then I moved to Kentucky Fried Chicken. I remember in my 12th grade, I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to make sculptures. I wanted to be a great sculptor. And my mother says, "No, your brother just got promoted at Kentucky Fried Chicken, so he's going to hook you up." So I worked there for about a year.
Yeah.
It was terrible, if you hear me saying this and you want to give me a franchise, it's not terrible, but it was terrible. And then I got one of the best jobs. I still consider one of the best jobs to this day. I was in the martial arts. I thought I could fight. And a friend of mine was about 6'2", and he took me for a job interview. And my mother taught me, when you're going for a job interview, don't take anyone because they may get the job you want. So my friend Darnell, 6'2", all day, 250 pounds, this football player. I was probably $130 wet, but I could fight. And so I went, and they said, "Would you like to fill out an application?" So I did, and I put on my hobby, martial arts. I took Taekwondo and Kung Fu. He got placed as security guard at the Kmart's on Plymouth and Southfield Freeway. My job was security on the Boblo boat. So I rode as security for a whole summer on the great famous Boblo boats that went to Boblo Island.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And then I left.
How old were you?
I was 18. And I did security up till I was 19. And then I signed up for the Air Force, and I went into the Air Force. And did that for 8 years, did 2 tours. Got out during Desert Storm. I didn't go to the theater of combat. I was serving during Desert Storm. Got out in New England. I was in Boston. And I started doing foster care. And I said, man, these kids need help. So when I was in undergrad, I had a mentor say go into education. And I wound up going into education and did a program in Boston, served 2 years in a school in Cambridge, Massachusetts, came back to Detroit and worked for a Grammy artist. I didn't know this guy was famous. He had 6 Grammys. He recorded with everybody. He was a gospel artist. And then he told me all the people he recorded with. I'm like, really? I called my brother and said, why didn't you tell me? He said, you know who the wine is. I said, no, I know Parliament, I know Ohio Players, I know the Funkadelic, the Brides, the Funkestein. I don't know these folks. So I've been working for him for about 21 years. So I'm in Detroit, but not with Detroit school system proper. We have 2 districts within Detroit. I managed 4 schools. I've been a principal. I'm probably the biggest walking anomaly you'll ever meet, you know.
You've got working missiles on the hood of your car. I still, that you took me a ride in your car. What is it? What year?
It's a 2010 Challenger.
And I mean, I heard you were a block away, and I heard you pull in here, and it's got a fighter jet shift handle in it, just really real out of a fighter jet. And I got in it the first day, and you hit a button, and little missiles flip up in the hood from underneath covers. And that just blew me away. It's cliche, but if you're gonna be one of the big dogs in a Detroit school system, I can see having missiles on your car.
You never know what goes down. The world has changed. So
that's just so cool.
So I went to Mopar Nationals, and I think it was Carlisle, and they had a Mopar event, and they had a special display of the Batmobile. And I'm like blown away. I grew up with the Batmobile. I grew up with the Green Hornet. I'm like, what? This is it. And when I peeped out the missiles, they were plastic. I said, come on. If I ever did that, I would do, and then it started from there. And I drew up what trapdoors would look like on the hood. And so I went and got some 20 millimeter shells from Joe's Army and Navy Supply, and I started sketching this stuff out. And I went to folks like you who are artists who can really take this from a concept and put it together. So I took it to a cat who used to have a shop in Royal Oak, and he gave me a price. I said, I can't afford that. I'm in public education. So he called me. He said, we want to just see if we can do it. What if we do it for half? I said, bet. And so, I got an F-16 live wire. It's called live wire because when the shifter went out, they would just simply unplug it and put in a new F-16 joystick.
Okay.
So I called a guy who sold military parts. When I told him what I was doing, he gave me this crazy price. He said, well, I'm going to give this to you, because I don't think anybody can do it. And the wires are still live. So shopped it around to a few folks, and yes, one button starts the car, and another button opens the trap doors. And now, that was cool prior to 9/11.
Yeah.
I took my daughter to the airport. She was in college, and I reached over to hug her, and I made a mistake and hit the button. And, folks were outside smoking, and the trap doors came up. This guy backed up. I was like, let the window down. No, they're fake. Get out, honey. I got to go. So if they're looking for me, you know where to find me now.
That's excellent. Man, tell us and you can start with your favorite one or the one that's stressing you out the most, but tell us what year your bikes are and what they are and what the makes are. Because I can't keep track.
I'll tell you the favorite. The favorite one is whichever one I'm on. Right? Again, it's the artistry. You think about this. Here was some guy in a shop. Let's take my 1910 Yale that I'm putting together. There was no CAD machine. There was no CNC machine. There was some cat conceptualizing, and this was just around the time bikes were really taking hold to move from looking like from bicycles to motorcycles. And so every time I'm on one of these bikes, I go, man, these guys were brave. Now this is the regular Joe Blow, but what about the guys like a Wells Bennett who said, I'm a ride this Henderson across country, right? Cannonball.
And not on our roads.
And not on our roads, right?
Roads, yeah.
And so the roads were so bad, they were taking railroad tracks. So they wouldn't have...
Really?
Yeah, so they could follow the tracks.
Yeah.
Because the roads were so bad. Now, you know how tracks are.
Oh, yeah.
And so when you look at these bikes, you go, man, these guys were riding these bikes. And so when you have events like the Race of Gentlemen, Sons of Speed, the Cannonball, it's a throwback to what these folks were going through.
What's the year cutoff for the Cannonball?
The year cutoff for the 2020 run is pre-1930.
So that's all pre-1930 motorcycles,
Right.
and they're going to ride them from country.
This year they're going from, in 2020, they're going to go from Sault Ste. Marie up north Michigan and run all the way down to a point in Texas.
And the catch is there's no electronics, no upgrades. It's not.
No.
These aren't modified and modernized bikes. These are the real things.
It's the real deal. You may have some safety equipment, some different brakes and so forth, but they're hammering it out. Check-in points, very specific. And if a 1925 Henderson and a 1914 Indian had a perfect score and came in, the win would be given to the older bike because the technology
cool.
would be a little less. And so when I look at it, I keep saying that, we think we're tough. When you got to ride a bike pre-1930 across country for 2 weeks, I mean, those folks doing that are really tough. So I got to make sure my wife's not listening. When this airs, I will be turning off all equipment. So I have 19 motorcycles.
19.
I have 19, and as we collectors or hoarders, as we're sometimes called, they're in different state of needing repair or disrepair, but for the most part, they're all there. People buy stocks and bonds, and those of us who really know, we buy vintage cars and vintage motorcycles. So I have a few 4-cylinders, American 4-cylinders. Just picked up a knucklehead last year. Pretty excited about that, a 41 pre-war knucklehead. Got a few pre-30 Harley Davidsons. Been blessed to run a 26 single and a 29 twin in the Race of Gentlemen. Right now, trying to put together a hopped up JD 27 to run. And so, I got a few bikes.
That's excellent. Now, the Race of Gentlemen is where I first ran across you, and it's a race on the New Jersey shoreline. It's on the beach. It's motorcycles and hot rods, and like the Cannonball Run, it has to be period correct hot rods and motorcycles. It can't be. What's the cutoff date? Like a 49, I think. 50.
For the cars, is 40. For the bikes is 46. I believe the cars are 36.
And everyone there is racing on the beach. It's 8th mile drag strip basically, and it's full on racing. And and I saw you there. I didn't know you, but I saw you go by on your single, and it looked good, and it was making the right noises.
It was easy to see me. I wasn't going that fast.
You told me a story one time of a motorcycle that you had bought, and it involves your Indian rings that you got on. And just the way history finds us sometimes.
That's a good way to put it.
It seems like, when you can almost, when you're in this world and you really get deep into the history of things, it's almost like you can will things to yourself.
Yeah.
You just think about something so hard and so long that it just starts happening. Tell us about that story.
That's true. I have a huge saying. Like I said, you grow up in Detroit and you see, I'm not a guy who's going to write an autobiography and talk about how many dead bodies I stepped over. That's not me. But it was edgy, and watching what my brother went through. And so you grow up with this edge. And about 25 years ago, I said, you know what? I told my wife, I'm going on this mission of kindness. I'm not going to die from hypertension and be balled up like we got to do in the concrete jungle. So I just started going on this mission of kindness and treating people great. I got friends, all types of political suasions, religion, non-religion. I have friends that's probably as close as you could be into the militia, and we're tight, right? And so what happens, what you give out is what comes back to you. I believe that wholeheartedly. And a year ago, I was at the Street Ride Nationals in Kentucky, and this guy was backing up his hot rod, and nobody was spotting him. He was getting ready to back into a tree, so I ran over and said, hey, sir, let me help you. So I spotted him, and I said, nice ride. And he said, I'm 72. Yeah, I've had this since I was 20. I'm like, what? So we started talking, and he said, I just picked up a 32 High Boy, original paint. And I'm like, man, that's beautiful. He said, yeah, I bought it because I wanted to race in this race called the Race of Gentlemen. I was like, oh, you talking my language? I've done that race. It's great. And he said, I think I've seen you. I said, yeah, it's not hard to miss. I had this old single, and I look like Denzel. I didn't say that. I don't look like Denzel. And so he said, well, let me tell you about this bike. And he told me about this bike owned by this lady. and she had no living relatives. And I set up to go look at the bike, and he had given me a price, and I brought that amount. When I got to talk to the lady, she increased the price by 3 times. And I told her, it's probably worth more than what you were going to sell it for. I can't afford that. I came prepared to pay what you offered. That's not true. I was going to offer a little less. And she says, no, I can't do that. And so I figured the deal was over. And we started talking, and she saw one of my rings. And she said, tell me about that ring. I said, well, I have a few Indian motorcycles, but my great-grandfather was Native American. And we started just talking about history. And about 10 minutes in, she says, you know what? I like you. I want you to buy my husband's bike. And, I think I teared up. For all my Detroit boys, that's not true. Yeah, I did tear up. And so she said, I don't have family. I said, you have family now.
Yeah.
I've actually gone back to see her 3 times. I've been offered 3 times what I've paid for the bike. And I won't sell it. Broke people, which I sometimes categorize myself. I'm not. I got a lot of wealthy relationships. But I always say it's just money. We shouldn't be living for money. And so the bike means a lot more because of how I got it. I met my friend Irv. That was a guy backing up the bike, and I met the lady. I mean, she has clarity of thought. Like I said, I've taken my children to see her. And so these bikes develop relationships. But yeah, I got a 41 knucklehead by being nice to a guy and helping him back up a car. And like you said, you can will things to happen.
Yeah. What's the furthest you've ever went for a bike? And by furthest, I mean the sketchiest or the furthest you've reached? Or
that's good. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not just distance, but because we do some crazy stuff.
Yeah, we do some. I'm gonna give you 2. The furthest.
My wife last time when I give her the speak of, I got to leave tomorrow and I got to drive to Florida. Yeah. Right now. She's like, here we go.
Look, if you got a good person behind you, So the furthest in miles, I rode out to California. I bought 3 bikes from a friend. We've become friends. He actually told me I couldn't come on his property because I knew he had bikes when nobody else did.
Okay.
And it was a family friend that knew of these bikes. He said, young man, you ain't come on my property. I don't sell my bikes. Then we became friends. And 3 years later, he sold me Indian 4. And so we every time I'm in California, I spend time with him. He recently sold me to JD. He said, I'll sell you this bike. So I did what you just said with Jenny. I said, honey, I got to make a quick run to California. So I left on a Thursday night, and I was back by Monday, back at work. The most sketchy was I had a bike that I'd been chasing. It was in rough part of Detroit. And I kind of knew these guys, but they kind of shady too. So I said, I don't buy anything stolen. You got to have paperwork. So we got title. But they were selling it for someone. And so I brought Joe. You see me with Joe all the time. I said, Joe, here's the deal. Make sure this is legit. They might try to get us. Leave the truck running. Do not get out.
Yeah.
And I'm not changing money until the bike is loaded. So when I pull up, there's 8 people there. I was dealing with one guy. My wife always says, why don't you just leave? It's a bike. I'm not leaving. And so I talked to the guy. I load up the bike. So the guy who set the deal up says, you need to give me another $100 for setting the deal up. I said, no, I can't do that, cat. And so he said, no, you got to give me another $100. I said, no, I'm going to load up the bike and I'm going to give you what you asked for. And if not, give my money back. He said, you haven't even paid me yet. I said, okay, then we don't even have a deal. So I load up the bike. Guy still asking for an extra $100. And then we tie the bike down. So I get off the truck guy. I pay the one guy who owned the bike. And the guy who wanted the $100, his friend came by and said, well, you should give us $100. At that point, Joe steps out the truck. And Joe, he doesn't say much. Mm-hmm. The greatest lieutenant you could have.
Yeah.
And the guy says, oh, come on, Detroit. You didn't have to bring your uncle. You don't have to worry about us. Then Joe said, no. It's not. He shouldn't worry about you all. You all should worry about me. He said, Detroit, are we ready? I said, we're all set. Let's go. So I don't advise people to do that unless you know where you're going. And having grown up in Detroit, you know, your gut talks to you and tell you where you should and shouldn't go. I've been invited to some place where I thought it was a setup and I didn't go.
Yeah. You mentioned a bike that you had chased in Detroit for a long time.
Yeah.
Tell me about motorcycle history in Detroit.
Wow, you know, people come to Detroit, and if you...
I mean, everyone knows, Motor City and cars,
Absolutely.
but I've been here 2 years now, and there is more than just cars here.
Yeah.
There's an industry history, there's machinist history, there's countless little shops for tooling and gear, you know, just amazing how many shops were here. And they're not like big companies, they were 1-2 little employed shops grinding tooling and stuff like that. It's just endless how many of those were here. And all those guys were gearheads. And I keep seeing motorcycle stuff everywhere.
Yeah, we keep making the mistake of thinking because New York is currently America's financial capital. So, you know, we treat history in its moment, not in its longevity. And we only look at history right now, you know. But New York, that's new to the game. Detroit was like the world financial capital. This is what put the world on wheels. No, Henry Ford didn't invent cars. He invented mass production, how to pay folks to be here, and he started building industry. But even before Henry Ford, you had motorcycle giants. So you had the Henderson brothers, right? They started a motorcycle company after studying what should happen with a 4-cylinder. Let's create a bike that can run heavy, have good bottom end, serve the police department, because the Detroit Police Department they were the first to use Hendersons as on the police force. Yeah. But what's crazy, when you come to Detroit and you see the rebirth that started in the 70s and 80s with the Renaissance, that's where the Henderson factory set, right on Jefferson.
Oh, man.
So you had where the Renaissance currently sits, excuse me, and the Canadian tunnel to go to Canada. Before that was there, that was the Henderson factory.
Wow.
They had an office there. They had another office. You also had a company called The Detroit. There was a motorcycle called The Detroit.
I never knew that. Never seen one.
And so this was done in 1910, 1911. It only survived 2 years. It looks very close to a Pierce. I do have a photo of a promo photo of a police on a Detroit. They say only 3 were made. A friend of mine, Dave Leitner, owned those 3 motors at one time. And he worked with one of the baddest historians and builders out there, Bruce Linsday, and they reverse engineered the Detroit. So if you go online and type in The Detroit Motorcycle 1910, and so if there's a bike that I would want to find in some old lady's garage, it would be The Detroit. They call me Detroit. I need that bike.
How many cylinders were they?
It was a single.
Okay.
It had gas and oil in the tubing. The oil was in the front down tube, and it had the exhaust up under the oil reservoir, supposedly to keep the oil running thin.
Really?
You know,
to heat the oil.
Absolutely had a toolbox in the top tube.
In 1910, they were thinking of that. Preheat the oil.
Absolutely.
I mean, sprint cars today still have oil heaters between races.
Yeah, so you step outside of Detroit, you have the Flanders. I have a postcard of a lady who rode a Flanders across country, and she's writing back to her sponsors that she stopped at the Flanders plant. You know?
Wow. So
you think about it, at one point there were 2,500 motorcycle marquees in this world. 2,500. So when you talk about the ones that survive today, that really speaks volume to not only their ingenuity, but their tenacity. In Detroit, it wasn't just cars, it was motorcycles, as you noted, you know.
Wow.
A lot of history. When you know how it goes, you start learning about the cars or the parts or the suppliers, and you learn all this great history, you know.
Yeah. When you took your bikes and you ran at the Race of Gentlemen, and you since went out to California and ran when they took the Trog out there. When you hear us say Trog, that's TROG, that stands for the Race of Gentlemen. And doing all that, that race is sponsored by Harley Davidson. And since the Race of Gentlemen, Harley Davidson has really stepped up and gotten involved. And it's great to see a huge company that keeps an eye on the past and actually salutes it. And tell us about the most recent event they had right in their own backyard, and you got to be a part of that.
Well, you know, Harley does their anniversary celebration every 5 years, so they had the 115th. And in partnering with Mel and the Race of Gentlemen and the Oilers Motorcycle and Car Club, they ran Trog on the beach in Milwaukee, Bradford Beach. And for those that don't know this, racing started on the beach. And then it progressed to dirt tracks and then NASCARs and Seamen as we see today. So this particular beach, they hadn't ran motorcycles on this beach since 1908.
Wow.
So Harley Davidson, with the pool that they had, got the beach set up for racing and they put Race of Gentlemen on. So I like to tell people, yes, I was invited to race for Harley Davidson.
And they built an oval.
They built an oval, and I probably shouldn't say this publicly, right? So
no one's listening.
All right.
Just us, don't worry.
You know, I'm going to ask, if you see me and ask this question, I'm going to say, no, I'm from Detroit. Quit talking to me. So, no, Lord, I'll tell you the truth. So I'm set up to race. I get the invitation. And you had to have run at least 3 races, so I did that, and they were all eighth of a mile, and they were straight, 660 feet of glory, right? And so we get in, we check into the host hotel, and we're getting the bike, getting everything ready, getting your gear ready, because people think it's dress up. I always tell people, if you think it's dress up, go race on the beach. If you think it's just dress up and then use a foot clutch, a hand shift, and so forth. So yes. I'm getting all my stuff. I'm trying to get mentally prepared. So I run into Jimmy out of California. He says, hey, I know you. So we get to talk, and we hadn't talked before. We had seen each other.
Just Jimmy White?
Jimmy White.
I know him from Hot Rod days.
Yes,
Great
yes.
guy. Good
yes,
guy.
And so we're talking, and he's telling me, well, just be careful in the turn, because that's how I had my leg broken. The guy came up under me. I said, no, we're good. We run 660 straight. And so he says, no, they're doing the oval tomorrow. Like, what? He said, no, it's cool. It's just like when you ran a dirt track. I wanted to say, I'm from Detroit. I ain't no dirt tracks, We played in the dirt, real dirty. And so I got out there, but the Trog folks are so great. And they said, race your bike. That's where people get in trouble. They over-race their talent. Mm-hmm. And so I got out there. We had a practice run on Friday, and it was unbelievable. I still haven't come down. And then Saturday we raced, and my guy Joe on the way back to Detroit was like, I can't believe you did that. I thought you were going to get killed.
How could you not?
Right.
I mean, how could you not?
It was, and that's it. It was so historical. Everybody talk about the loose sand and this and that. Look, I didn't make it out of Detroit. I make wise decisions, but if you're going to live this life, sometimes you just got to take chances, and you got to take them within your talent. People say, he need a faster bike. I probably shouldn't say there's a stroker kit on my 29 DL, right? I just got to get my talent to match the speed, and as that, goes, I'll start doing something. I'm actually having a bike built up. Those guys run all out, and that 115th celebration, to have Willie G and the Davidson family sitting up in the stands was like, are you kidding me? And then I rode the bike in the next day to a show by mistake. And it was like, no, put the bike in. It was a ride-in. You had to be in by a certain time. So I went and got the cleaning supplies. And they said, no, do not touch it. Leave it just like it was race. And I told one guy, yeah. He said, how much to buy? Because I think it killed the value. And when the curators came up, said, trust me, the values went up. You raced it for Harley Davidson.
Yeah, you raced it for Harley on their track.
On their track. So it was an unbelievable experience. There's some requirements. Your bike they must fit a certain criteria. And you just got to be good people. Those folks, I call it the Trog family. Just good people, Yeah,
exactly. Very good. bring us to your next bike. There's a motorcycle show called Born Free, and it's, as I understand it, it's an invite-only show where the guys that run it, they're deep into the game. They know all the players, and they search out builders that are across the country that are building phenomenal bikes that might not be known, like the Billy Lanes and the Jesse James and whatnot. These are guys in their back garages and in their home basements that are building killer bikes, and they're doing a phenomenal job of getting these guys noticed. And from what I hear, you're building a bike for Born Free.
I am. I like to tell people about that weekend. I had followed Born Free for a few years, and my hope was to just go to the show, just get a ticket, change my schedule, and make it out to Born Free. I had a few shows on my bucket list, and that was near the top. So when I saw that they had some bikes displayed, I'm like, are you kidding me? And then they moved the display. So even though I raced that weekend, had my bike in the show, I was slightly depressed that I had missed this exhibit. And they simply moved it like 20 feet to get it out the rain. So I went over, I was talking to these folks, and I was asked would I consider doing a bike for Born Free. Of course the anxiety and nervous kick in. But again, I'm like, I'm not missing this opportunity, so yes. So I had a few engines and frames laying around, and I'm kind of old school. What's cool about Born Free, this chopper scene is huge. So if you want to see some of the baddest choppers in the game, you go to Born Free. But I knew I wanted to do something true to kind of what I was collecting, which is vintage bikes. In my club, they call me old school or Detroit. The name of my company is Detroit Antique Motorcycle. The acronym is DAM. And that came about because every time somebody saw one of my bikes, they would go, damn. I told my wife, I got to do something with that. I don't curse too much. And so my pastor said, that's cursing. No, it's not. If you spell it correctly, it doesn't have an N, so damn. I didn't say that to my pastor. But so I said I would do something along those lines. And if I'm not mistaken, it hadn't been an American four-cylinder. So doing a crazy tricked out Henderson, with some Super X bars pulled down to pull me forward. Trying to do a zero style with, cut down the weight. Saw a race car with these sausage type pipes. It's probably gonna burn up my leather pants. So been pulling that together. Is pretty exciting and stressful because the folks you are counting on to back out. My painter just backed out a few weeks ago. That has me in a panic mode. But again, I didn't make it out of Detroit and kind of do some of the things I did by giving up. So the Born Free is like, wow. So I talked to, I sent Large Hand Grant and Mike a picture of a ring they gave out last year.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are you all going to give out a ring again this year? And they're like, we're not sure. I'm like, you have to. Everybody's looking for a motivation. Come on, Tom Brady is 41 years old. He just won the Super Bowl, right? So I'm sure he was like, this is the most important. So I need a ring. So, I look at this ring, and so I'm pretty excited about Born Free, simply because it gives an opportunity to kind of put what I do on the map. I like to think I'm more of a conceptual person and come up with these crazy plans for these bikes. There's truly some geniuses out there that's builders. I appreciate being called a builder. I'm very cautious, however. I know cats who can go in their garage, shut the door, and everything from the motor to bending the metal. But like you said, they recognize guys who may not have a TV show, may not be in the game. When you talk about Billy Lane, he's changed the game, so he should be recognized, and he's also promoting. But they also recognize folks that just in their garages, in their basement, in their living room. I work between my living room, my garage, and a friend of mine who's a machinist. So, yeah, Born Free is the third weekend in June. I'm looking forward to it. I'll probably be right down to the wire.
Yeah.
I'll drive it out in the van, and
it's common, man. It is. I've been in the show car circuit for a long time, and even with the vintage race cars, you try to plan and you try to figure everything out, but you go through the stages of whatever can go wrong will go wrong, and it's a test.
It is, and you got to keep pushing. I mean, even sitting here, it's crazy. I had a friend was like, "Man, there's a young cat out there working on Miller cars." I'm like, "Okay, what's Miller cars?" He was telling me. I was like, "Wow!" And then I was racing back from California, actually picking up a bike, and I had lost one of my former students, and it was pretty stressful. But we knew we weren't going to make it back in time for the funeral. So Joe was like, "Look, let's just run over to Cincinnati, check out Autorama, and take your mind off this." And so I said, "Okay." And so we stopped in, and then I saw Bobby Green's car. And I'm like, "Wow, I asked your wife, is Bobby Green here? You know Bobby Green?" I said, "I don't really know him. I know his car. If my husband worked on that, I don't need to see Bobby Green. I need to see your husband." Because it's the people behind the scene. Bobby's good folk. But to see what, you keep in these historic cars, and I tell folks, "Yeah, I know Josh, They go way back to like 2 years ago."
That's right, man. Tell us, what's the future hold for you? What's your plans? You gonna try to do your own thing?
I am
building bikes.
I'm gonna try to do my own thing. I had a friend who had a garage full of bikes and parts, and he got sick. He had called me, said, "You should buy this bike." I wound up buying it. It was a 101 Scout, and he got sick. He said, "I don't think I'm that sick," and 45 days later, he was dead.
Wow.
I said, "Oh, man, that's crazy." And so that's how I wind up racing the Twin, the 1929. It's called Picasso because it's set in the living room. It didn't even have Loctite. So I came home and told my wife, "Look, I'm racing this." She said, "That's our investment." No, we live once, and we gotta meet good people and live a good life and do those things. And so when Bill passed, I kind of changed my focus and really said, let's enjoy this stuff we have and enjoy the people. So I've been in public education now for about 24, 25 years, and it's changed. Used to tell a kid if they were wrong, the parent would come in and discipline the kid. Now the parent come in and say, "You can't talk to my kid. You better not say anything to me." And so I've done it long enough. I'll still do mentoring, but I think with Detroit Antique Motorcycle, I'll start, because a lot of folks are looking for vintage bikes and don't know where to start. So our plan was with DAM was to try to start selling and trading and helping people get into the lifestyle. It's not a hobby. I wake up thinking bikes, go to sleep. And so I have an invitational coming up. Actually, you all are first hearing it. The fourth weekend is 5 weekends this year in August. So August 2009, we'll be doing the DAM Invitational. That's Detroit Antique Motorcycle Invitational. I'm also the chairman for the Motorcycle Selection Committee for the Concours d'Elegance of America in St. John. So it's really about just kind of promoting this lifestyle. I've looked at Born Free and Mama Tried, and we need that scene in Detroit.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of good people who can show a lot of great bikes, and so I'll be doing that. And so if you see me and I'm asking for a quarter, hey, I'm just a struggling artist.
Where's the DAM Invitational? Where do you know where that's going to be at?
I have two places I'm negotiating contracts right now. So if you follow me on Instagram, I'm under Detroit Antique Motorcycle, and then I have a core group. It's about 5 of us, and we're Detroit Motorcycle Union. So Detroit Antique Motorcycle, acronym, as I said before, is DAM, and our slogan is, "It's what you say when you see our bikes." Detroit Motorcycle Union, acronym is DMU, and if you say it fast enough, it's damn you. And it's what we say to you when you don't like our bikes. So I have Detroit Antique Motorcycle and Detroit Motorcycle Union, and we'll be doing antique motorcycle.
You guys do a lot of benefit rides. I've seen you and your wife on benefit rides.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
I ride with the Buffalo Soldiers. Yeah, ride with the Buffalo Soldiers. About 6 years ago, walked into the Harley-Davidson Museum, and in their showcase was these colors, this motorcycle vest I said, wow, what's up with that? And I'm familiar with the military Buffalo Soldier Regiment that went from 1866 to 1944 through an act of Congress. And so I did a little research. I say if I ever rode with a club, I was kind of a lone wolf, but if I ever rode with a club, I would ride with the Buffalo Soldiers. And so I wind up meeting a gentleman in Detroit and joined the Buffalo Soldiers, been with them about 5 or 6 years. And our thing is we don't come to conquer, seize, or sell product. We just come to help young people. So we have 3 pillars, and that is we have to serve, we have to ride, you have to know the history, so folks can be familiar with the history. So we do a lot of benefits, and then we do a veterans run to D.C. My wife has a Honda F6B, lightning fast. Oh my God. So, we rode to D.C. and, I probably shouldn't say this, but I give my wife a shout out. I mean, we was running out. I mean, I'm old school. I don't try to go fast. I was doing about 75, 80. She pulled up on the side. Why are we going so slow? Like, who are you? And what's your boyfriend's name? Who have you been riding with? So she's into riding. When I was divorced, and so when I met her, we were courting. I said, I'm going to do this right. Happy wife, happy life, and so forth. So I was courting her, and I went to pick her up, and while she was getting ready, I noticed some motorcycle magazines on the coffee table. And for young people, that's a table that sits in the living room where you would have coffee. So I noticed these 2 motorcycle magazines on the coffee table. And when she came out, I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were dating someone." She said, "Why do you say that?" And she said, I said, the motorcycle magazines, maybe your boyfriend's magazine. This was before the Me Too movement, right? I think my wife started the Me Too movement. She was like, what? Those are my magazines. What are you saying? I'm going to have a bike one day. So
good for her.
She has a F6B, and I just gave her, I have a twin to the 29 Harley, and I gave her a 28 101 Scout.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Good, man. Yeah. Very good. That's awesome. Man, it's an honor. It is.
Oh, the honor's mine. I mean, you're in the game.
Morgan Freeman's ain't got nothing on you.
Hey, take the chains off. Take the chains off.
Man, I'm looking forward to this summer and seeing your bikes come together, and wish you the best with your new endeavor. And it's cool to be friends with you, man.
Hey, same here. I appreciate it. Like I said, folks who do this, I've come full circle, wanting to be an artist and to see what folks do. There's no known civilization that hasn't embraced the art, and what we do with these motorcycles and cars, they're art. And so, really the honor's mine. And for what you're doing to get the word out through your podcast. So if you're not following Shaw's podcast, you ain't even with the game.
Man, I appreciate it. And that wraps this one up. Keep tuned for the next podcast coming up. We're not sure who might sneak in here, but we'll let you know as soon as we do. Thank you very much.